We've been through 6 chapters so far, where we just have a few halakot left in chapter 6 of the laws of Hilkot, Avadot, Kokavim, Bakukotehim, which is the laws of idolatry and their statutes. So basically, for people that are just catching up, if you look on YouTube, you can find all the previous classes. We're trying to understand basically what Hashem teaches us from the Torah and from our sages with the oral Torah, what God expects us concerning idolatry. And this involves Jews and non-Jews alike. Goes out to the whole world on what God expects concerning idolatrous behavior, learning about it, studying it. God forbid that we would ever fall into the worship of idols, but you know, it's good to know these things, in other words. So, okay, anybody have a good joke? No? All right. We have a dinosaur joke in the house.
Dinosaur joke right here.
I thought the Torah was a dinosaur.
Just not extinct, right?
What do you call a ninja dinosaur?
What do you call a ninja dinosaur? Wow, I'm baffled. What do we do?
You never saw it.
You never saw us. See, so sneaky one, huh? That's a good one. Thank you.
That is good.
All right, that took all the pressure off.
That's right.
All right. So it's like I said, it's been a long time. So we'll review the last Holocaust a little bit. We left off talking about the laws concerning Molech. If you guys remember, it's directly written in the Torah not to offer your progeny to the false deity or service of Molech. Okay. So we talked about that a little bit, and we left off where in chapter 6, Holocaust 6, it says, a monument which the Torah has forbidden is a structure around which people gather. So this prohibition applies even when it was constructed for the service of God, because this is a pagan practice. So Hashem doesn't accept monuments built even for his service. There's only one monument that Hashem commanded to be built for his service. Any guesses? Anybody? The monument that Hashem, the temple, yes. The Beit HaMikdash. Before that it was known as the Mishkan. The traveling version of the temple was the Mishkan, right? Or the tabernacle. Okay, so it's prohibited to build a monument even for the service of God, because this is a pagan practice, as Deuteronomy 16:22 states, do not erect a monument which God hates. Whoever erects a monument is punished by lashes. So they're not cut off from the people with death, but they do get a pretty bad spanking with a stick or whatever the mode of lashes, up to, 40 lashes. So they typically would never deal out any more than 39. Okay, so similarly, a person who bows down on the kneeling stone mentioned in the Torah receives lashes, even if he prostrates oneself upon it to God. As Leviticus 26:1 states, do not place a kneeling stone in your land to prostrate yourself upon it. The pagans would customarily place a stone before a false deity so they could prostrate themselves upon it. Therefore, this practice is not followed in the worship of God. A person is not punished by lashes until he spreads out his hands and feet on the stone, thus prostrating himself on it entirely. This is what the Torah means by bowing. So to lay full frontal, face down, hands and feet on the ground. Okay, let's see. There's a note here. It's a reference to bowing. It says Megillah 22b derives this concept from Genesis 37:10. Shall your mother and I come to prostrate ourselves before you on the earth? This sounds like it's referring to Yosef.
Same, that's the words he spoke to. So.
Right. Shall your mother and I, because Joseph had a dream about the sun and the moon and bowing and these things, and he was telling his father about his dream, if I remember correctly, and he says, so what are your mother and I supposed to come and bow before you on the earth, to prostrate? Of course, that's not the case, but all right. Any questions here? Yes.
When do these rules not prostrate yourself apply?
Okay, we're going into that right now. Good question. We're going into that now. The question was, when do these rules apply not to prostrate yourself? Very good. So that's Holocaust 7 starts with this. Where does the prohibition mentioned above apply? Every place outside the temple. In the temple, however, it is permitted to bow down to God on stone. But anywhere outside the temple, it is not permitted to bow down before any object on stone. Yes, sir.
Moses bowed to the three people in Abraham, sorry. He bowed down to the three people.
Yes, bowing to honor someone, such as a king or a guest, is a completely different idea than bowing before a deity, our Rabbi Jacobian just spoke about this yesterday, so it's a good point to bring up. There is basically two kinds of bowing: bowing to honor someone because of their position, such as a king or a guest or someone you want to give kavod or honor to, versus bowing down just to an object of worship.
Is there a difference between bowing down physically all the way down, prostrating yourself, or just bowing down, like you do, sort of greeting against someone?
Yeah, like in some Asian cultures, you mean, where the people will bow?
President Obama when he became president, he went to the Middle East and was criticized that he bowed down before the king of Saudi Arabia.
No, that's proper. That's absolutely proper.
You know, that seems like a greeting. That doesn't seem like a worship.
No, it's absolutely not a worship. Now, there are some religious leaders that wear a ring that signifies their religious status, if you would. To kiss the ring, that's not appropriate. But to bow before a king or someone of dignitary stature is by no means a problem. We read about Mordecai, that it says the text says that he refused to bow down before Haman. The sages teach us that the primary reason he wouldn't bow before Haman was not because he didn't want to give kavod to Haman's position, but he had an idol on a chain on his neck. So he refused to bow to the idol, not so much the man. Because if you read later on in the same text, it talks about where Mordecai bowed before the king himself.
That makes sense.
So where's the difference here? He wouldn't bow to Haman, but he bows to the king. Haman was the king's right-hand man, so he did deserve some honor, of course. So what's the difference? It was the idol hanging from the chain on his neck. Okay. So, yeah, it's absolutely fine to bow to, as a custom of honor or greeting to someone. That's not a problem. It's when it's an object of worship. That's what we're dealing with. Let's see. So every place outside the temple, it is not permitted to bow down on stone. This concept is derived as follows. Leviticus states, do not place in your land, so on. And in your land it is forbidden to prostrate oneself on stones. You may, however, prostrate yourself on hewn stones in the temple. So the temple courtyard and the temple building were paved with stones, and the Jews and the priests would prostrate themselves there. So here's a prime example. Imagine on Yom Kippur, you have people showing up, from all over the nation of Israel and even all over the world to come to worship Hashem on this day, and the shofar would be sounded on this day, and this is the one time of year that the explicit name of Hashem would be mentioned. And then there would be a phrase that said, it's the phrase after we say the first paragraph of Shema is Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. This phrase would be said, and while being said, the people would prostrate themselves in the courtyard towards the sanctuary. So this is, the courtyard of the temple would be cut stone, paved with cut stone. So that's one time where we would see this, or even, maybe possibly any day where people were there bringing offerings and prostrating themselves towards the sanctuary.
Adam, I would submit maybe this would be a good place to mention the reason why in postmodern Judaism, or in modern Judaism period, Jews do not kneel to pray, they stand and pray. And because after the Templar era, when there is no temple, it's very clear that it's something you just want to avoid. You don't get on your knees to pray, just to avoid the whole situation of doing anything like the pagans do. And if you notice, every pagan religion in the world kneels or prostrates itself.
Yeah, primarily every religion in the world. Maybe there's a few rogue religions that don't kneel, but it's right. But the major religions of the world, other than Judaism, primarily kneel or bow when they pray. Primarily. And like Reuven was saying here, obviously, according to the laws of the Torah, we don't want to mimic things that idolatrous or false types of modes of worship. We don't want to copy those things. And that's the primary mode of worship all over the world today, is to kneel or bow during prayer. So even today, Jews will do in their prayers there's 4 times that a Jewish person bows during the prayer services. Once in the beginning with the opening blessing, then there's 2 blessings in the middle that one would bow, and then to finish off the prayer service, this is the part, the Shemoneh Esrei we're talking about. At the very end, one bows, but it's not a prostration. The knees are bent, then the waist, and then the neck. And it's all done while standing. Okay. Another thing that we don't do is put our hands together. And if one must put their hands together, it's done like this. But typically, your hands would be up with your, if you're praying, your siddur should be in your hands.
Right.
So, or your prayer book. Okay. So this relates to what you brought up, Reuven. So a person, however, they may, however, prostrate themselves on hewn stones in the temple. For this reason, it is a universally accepted custom among the Jewish people to place mats, straw, or hay in synagogues that are paved with stones to separate between their faces and the stones. Okay. So Megillah 22b mentions this concept in connection with the recitation of Tachanun prayers, which certain individuals would recite lying spread out on the floor. Today this is not practiced. We have to remember this book of Halakha was assembled a little over 800 years ago. So the practices have changed slightly over the years due to the economic and political environments. We have to remember that the Jewish people are largely in exile, so in a lot of cases we're at mercy of the governments where we live in different countries and such. Okay, so mats, straw, or hay in synagogues that are paved with stones to separate between their faces and the stones. If it is impossible to find anything to separate between them and the stones, the person should go to another place to prostrate himself or lie on his side. so that he will not press his face to the stone. A person who prostrates himself to God upon paved stones without spreading out his hands and feet is not punished by lashes. He is, however, punished by blows for rebelliousness. In contrast, one who prostrates himself to a false deity should be stoned to death. Big difference in severity.
Do we have any history where we know that these punishments were actually taking place?
That's a good question. The question is there any record in history where the Jewish court would have enacted these modes of execution, right? There are certain places in the Torah where people did certain things and it was shown. Some teachers would say that a lot of these things were never enacted, and some sages in the Talmud give explanations on where these things definitely happened. I'm not educated enough to know right off the top of my head, but that is something that I can review and get back to everyone on that. Yeah, this may help too. None of this is done to a person out of ignorance, ever. These laws do not apply to people who have done things out of ignorance. This, for example, the blows for rebelliousness. This is not someone that will receive blows because he inadvertently prostrated himself and towards Hashem on stone. If he did it, of course, if he was doing this ignorantly, someone would educate him. But then out of rebelliousness, this thing continues. This is where this is where the severity of dealing with it comes up. And this isn't done just by bystanders, like you were pointing out. This is all enacted by the court. And the court has always taken great. It cannot make a judgment without it being under the ruling of the Torah. And a lot of times when the temple was standing, most of these things, the presence of God, the tangible presence of Hashem was in the temple. So, of course, we know that God sees everything and He's everywhere. Nothing goes without being on record with Hashem. But when the tangible presence of God is in a place, especially in a house of judgment, a house of worship and prayer, it brings things to a different perspective. So it's not, respectfully, it's not something that would be done willy-nilly or just on a whim or out of ignorance. These things are not enacted today. The closest thing that the Jewish people have today to this type of system is known as a Beit Din, which is a local court of 3 judges. And usually that's there to handle civil matters, not capital cases and things. They don't handle capital cases. So for example, if you have a car salesman in the Jewish community and someone buys a car from him and it's a lemon or whatever, God forbid, the Beit Din would work out these things. They work out conversions, people that want to join in with the Jewish people. Things like that, but not capital. There is no capital judgments these days. It can't happen without the Sanhedrin. Because only the high court can make these judgments of capital punishment. So never out of ignorance. These are people that have definitely been warned and that understand what God expects out of a person. Okay. This is something throughout these chapters that we've been studying over the months that we have to not constantly, but we reiterate that these are things that are not typically not in place today because of the lack of the courts. Thank you for that. Excuse me. Okay. Halakha 8, a person who prostrates himself, which is again bowing down with his face to the ground, and involves his hands and his feet, his whole face frontal to the floor. A person who prostrates himself to God upon paved stones without spreading out his hands and feet is not punished by lashes. He is, however, punished by blows for rebelliousness. In contrast, one who prostrates himself to a false deity should be stoned to death, whether or not he spreads out his hands and feet. As soon as he buries his face in the ground, he is liable. So from the Rambam's expression, it would appear that the transgressor's face would have to touch the ground. From Tractate Sanhedrin 65a, however, it appears that one is liable even when one merely bent over in deference to the false deity. Halakha 9, a person who plants a tree near the altar or anywhere in the temple courtyard, regardless of whether it is a fruit-bearing tree or not, is punished by lashes. As Deuteronomy 16:21 states, do not plant an Asherah or any other tree near the altar of God your Lord. This prohibition applies even when he did so to beautify the temple and make it more attractive. The reason for this prohibition is that this was a pagan practice. They would plant trees near their altars so that the people would gather there. And let's see, we're about to wrap up chapter 6. Halakha 10, it is forbidden to construct a porch made of wood in the temple as one would do in one's courtyard, even though the wood would be affixed within the structure and not planted within the ground. This is an extra restriction as implied by the words any other tree in the verse cited above. Instead, all the porches and structures which protruded from the walls within the sanctuary were of stone and not of wood. So as an extra measure, wood obviously comes from trees, so not wood from any other tree would be used to make a structure inside of the temple. Only stone. Okay. Any comments or questions before we go to chapter 7? Okay. That was pretty straightforward. Chapter 7, Halakha 1, it is a positive commandment to destroy false deities. Now, again, destroying these false deities is a commandment specifically to the land of Israel. It's not proper to go into other people's domains in other nations and countries and take it upon oneself to destroy public property or private property, nonetheless. Yeah, can't go into to where?
Greece.
Oh, yeah, you can't go to Greece with a sledgehammer or anywhere else for that matter. I mean, if it's part of your clothing and your accessories maybe, but you can't use it for destroying things. Okay, so it's a positive commandment to destroy false deities, all their accessories, and everything that is made for their purposes. As Deuteronomy 12:2 states, you shall surely destroy all the places where the Gentiles served their gods, and as implied by Deuteronomy 7 verse 5, rather what you should do to them is tear down their altars. In Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, the mitzvah requires us to hunt after idol worship until it is eradicated from our entire land. In the diaspora, the exile, however, we are not required to hunt after it. Rather, whenever we conquer a place, we must destroy all the false deities contained within. The source for this distinction is Deuteronomy 12:3, which states, and you shall destroy their name from this place, implying that you are obligated to hunt false deities in Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, but you are not obligated to do so in the diaspora or the exile in other countries.
Is that because of the holiness of the land, to maintain the holiness of the land?
Yeah, it falls under the idea of purging the evil from the land. Okay, Halakha 2. It is forbidden to benefit from false deities, their accessories, offerings for them, and anything made for them, as implied by Deuteronomy 7:26. Do not bring an abomination to your home. Anyone who derives benefit from any of the above receives 2 measures of lashes, one because of the prohibition, do not bring an abomination, and one because of the prohibition, let nothing which is condemned cling to your hand. Number 3, Halakha 3, it is forbidden to benefit from an animal which was sacrificed to false deities in its entirety, even its excrement, its bones, its horns, its hooves, and its hide. It is forbidden to benefit from it at all. To cite an example, the hide of an animal which is marked by a sign that indicates that it was offered as a sacrifice to false deities. For example, it has a round hole in the place of the heart through which the heart is extracted, which was a common practice of idolaters. It is forbidden to benefit from all of these hides and others of the like. Number 4, what is the difference between an idol belonging to a Gentile and one belonging to a Jew? Wow. It is forbidden to benefit from an idol belonging to a Gentile immediately after it is fashioned, as implied by Deuteronomy 7, verse 25. You shall burn the sculptures of their gods with fire. For example, they are considered gods as soon as they have been sculpted. In contrast, it is not forbidden to benefit from a Jew's idol until he worships it, as implied by Deuteronomy 27:15. Cursed is the person who makes an idol and places it in a hidden place. For example, it is not forbidden until he does private acts, for example, worship, on its behalf. The accessories of idol worship, whether belonging to a Jew or to a Gentile, are forbidden until they were actually used for the purpose of idol worship. Number 5, when a
Sorry, I'm kind of thinking that, so if you're a Gentile, the moment that something is fashioned, that's not good, right? But you're a Jew, you can have it, but you don't, it doesn't, I'm not sure that I heard this correct, so that's what I'm trying to, so a Jew can have one, but it's not an idol until he bows down to it, basically.
Okay, it's a little bit more complicated, or I don't want to say complicated, it's more in depth. Complex, thank you. Let's review this, and we'll stop with this. We'll stop here with the text, and we'll pick up on Halakha 5 next class. Okay, so we'll go through it again. What is the difference between an idol belonging to a Gentile and one belonging to a Jew? It is forbidden to benefit from an idol belonging to a Gentile immediately after it is fashioned. As implied by Deuteronomy 7:25, you shall burn the sculptures of their god with fire. For example, they are considered gods as soon as they have been sculpted.
So, like, you couldn't you couldn't make it for him, like, be commissioned as his, and make it and benefit from it because you get paid for making it.
Right, because the, all right, let's look at this again. You shall burn the sculptures of their gods with fire. They are considered gods as soon as they have been sculpted. So the sculptures of their gods. So the idol, the type of idol we're talking about here, it was specifically sculpted as an idol. So it's to be burned with fire or destroyed, respectively. So it is forbidden to benefit from it immediately after it has been fashioned, because it's sculpted as a deity, more or less.
Okay, but this is something that is being spoken to the Jewish people.
The laws of idolatry are specific to everyone. There are certain instances here where it divides things that have to do specifically with the Jewish people, but at large, the laws of idolatry apply to all peoples.
Why would a Jew who says there is only one God and Hashem has specifically said, have no gods before me, why would he even want to have such a thing, have it in his possession?
Okay, because an idol of a non-Jew is a sculpted item. As soon as it's sculpted, it's already.
Right, but why, I thought we were saying if a Jew had one in his possession, why would a Jew even have one?
All right, we're gonna get into this some more here. It's I'm not discarding your question. This is complex. We got to pick it apart. Okay. Okay. In contrast, it is not forbidden to benefit from a Jew's sculpted idol or sculpture until he worships it. Okay. As implied by Deuteronomy 27:15, cursed is the person who makes an idol and places it in a hidden place. For example, it is not forbidden until he does private acts of worship on its behalf. So a Jew may not necessarily make a sculpture for the purpose of it being an idol. So, I'm going to go to the commentary here. What is the difference with regard to the prohibition mentioned in the previous law between an idol belonging to a Gentile and one belonging to a Jew? It is forbidden to benefit from an idol belonging to a Gentile immediately after it is fashioned as implied by the Torah's commandment to destroy idols. You shall burn the sculptures of the gods with fire. For example, the mention of the word sculpture is an addition teaching that they are considered gods as soon as they have been sculpted, whether they have been worshipped or not. This is in the case of a Gentile having a sculpted item that's an idol. It's still an idol whether it had been worshipped or not, because it was fashioned specifically for the purpose of idolatry. Therefore, they are not forbidden. Therefore, they are forbidden from that time onward. Note the comments of Lechem Mishneh, which mentions an apparent contradiction between these statements in chapter 8, halakha 8, and so on. In contrast, it is not forbidden to benefit from a Jew's idol until he worships it, as implied by Deuteronomy 27:15. Cursed is the person who makes an idol and places it in a hidden place. But when does the curse fall? Question here, when does the curse fall? Not when the idol is made, but when it is placed in a hidden place. For example, it is not forbidden until he does private acts of worship, for it is unlikely that a Jew would worship a false deity openly. The accessories of idol worship, whether belonging to a Jew or non-Jew, are not forbidden until they are actually used for the purpose of idol worship. Okay, Avodah Zarah 51b derives this concept from exegesis of Deuteronomy 12:2, which states, "You shall surely destroy all the places where the Gentiles serve their gods. The Gentiles' place of worship and their accessories to idol worship are not forbidden until the false deities are served." Okay, there's an aspect here that I'm having trouble understanding, along with your question. What would be the purpose of a Jewish person having an idol at all? Right.
Did Rachel have one? Was it Rachel?
Yeah, she took her father's idol. She didn't make one.
We have an example whenever they invade a country and they lay it to waste. You can pick something up off the ground that's beautiful, it's a nice sculpted image, and think this is valuable and I could bring it in our house. It'd be worth keeping, and it's a warning. You cannot, even if you don't know it was worshipped or not, when it was formed for the purpose of their idolatrous practice, forbidden. That's why they had to destroy it. They had to tear up, even precious gold had to be melted down and buried in the ground. They couldn't even derive from the idol the gold that was in the idol. They would have to destroy it.
Like Jericho.
Like Jericho, prime example.
He took an Achan.
So you couldn't even take it, melt it down, and repurpose it.
No, the gold is for all the materials forbidden.
So it's not necessarily a Jew. Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
I think that what this is trying to say is that if you find the statue, said, you find a statue from a place you're pillaging, you don't take it back because you know whether or not it's an idol. If, for instance, you're walking through an abandoned house, and you find that belonged to a Jew, and you find a statue, it probably wasn't used as an idol unless it was hidden back, like it was used for idolatry.
Yeah, like you see this in a lot of thriller movies where you have this this serial killer, would-be serial killer, and they break into the police break in, and they go, and he's got this shrine in the back corner, hidden behind this closet with all these secret doors and passages, and they open it up, and it's these things, these objects of worship with candles and all this stuff. It's done in.
So this is saying more that not a Jew sat down and carved an idol, but that he found one. So
Well, it could be the Jew carving an idol, but until he worships it,
Until he treats it
It's
like
not
an
just
idol.
But then I'm sorry if I'm being difficult, but why would a Jew carve one?
well, he
in the
wouldn't.
first place?
He carved a sculpture.
He would just do a sculpture, like a jewel of a horse or whatever. But unless you worship it, it's not an idol. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's saying.
Carve it to be an
Right,
idol.
right.
So the law here is saying basically, from what I'm gathering, and I'll ask my rabbi to help clarify this because it is complex.
Kind of confusing.
Yeah, the rabbi will be. He'll probably in like 30 seconds say, "Oh, this, and this." Yeah, Toby.
In the Hebrew, which kind of Gentile is it? Because I hear that there are two different kinds of Gentiles.
It's definitely going to be an idolatrous Gentile. It's not going to be a. It's what does it say, John? So it's an idol worshiper specifically. So it's a non-Jewish idol worshiper. So someone who worships Kokhavim is a definite idol worshiper, there without a doubt. So it's assumed here, what it's saying is that if an idol worshiper has a sculpture, you destroy it. Someone who's known to be an idol worshiper, the sculptures, you presume they're idols, you destroy them. If a Jewish person has a sculpture, unless it's hidden away for purposes of worship, it's not necessarily a prohibited object to benefit from.
I guess what was confusing me, it was saying a Jew's idol.
Right.
That was, I guess, throwing.
And the word idol is in brackets here. It's a contextual word. Did I see a hand go up over here? No? Okay. Okay, so I think we'll stop here with the text, and next time we'll pick it up. If anybody has any questions or comments, we're open for discussion.